Welcome to another segment of our Medicine and Society series, co-sponsored by the Mecklenburg County Medical Society and by the Ethics Center at UNC Charlotte. Hi, we have three great guests today, and you all have come up with the title for the program, From S.A.D to G.L.A.D. And to let our audience in on the story, I'll tell them what S.A.D to G.L.A.D means. It means stress, anxiety, and depression to gratitude, love, awareness, and drive. It sounds great, you know, hey, sign me up. And our guests are Mr. Peter Popovich from Popovich Associates, Dr. John Hall, who is a psychiatrist. He specializes or has a subspecialty in addiction psychiatry and in psychosomatic medication. And Dr. Dick Blackwell, Dr. Hall is an MD, Dr. Dick Blackwell is a PhD, sure. And he is a counseling psychologist, which is, I've been informed, is different from a clinical psychologist. A little bit. A little bit. Well, we'll talk about that later, okay? I've been looking forward to this show because I thought I'd get a lot of free advice, you know what I mean? And, you know, at the present rate of services, I thought that'd be a good deal. And I was wondering, with you, Dick, in particular, we just got off the holiday season. Yeah. You know, November, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, I guess Super Bowl counts or whatever. And we're heading into Valentine's, Mother's Day, graduations, weddings, all these wonderful, supposedly wonderful events. And I frequently have the experience as experiencing these days that I sort of visualize them as they're going to be great and they're going to be wonderful. I'm going to feel so good. Yeah. And what happens is everybody starts yelling at each other. People are pouting. Old news bubbles to the surface, and at the end, I can't wait till they go home, and I feel depressed and sorry and sad, really sad, and just wondering what it is about the kind of expectations we create, not only about special days, but about goals we're going to achieve or who we're going to be when we grow up, which I still don't know, and what actually one experiences, because it happens to me all the time, a discrepancy between expectation and experience. And I was wondering, Dick, if you could explain that to me. How can I get over that?
Well, I don't know that I can explain to you how to get over it, but I'll sort of lead into the other two guys with some of the bad news about that.
What's the bad news?
Well, S.A.D can also stand for Seasonal Affective Disorder.
Yes,
you know,
I'm feeling it today.
We make up a name to cover everything in therapy, and then we categorize it and we give it a number, and then we decide how much we're going to reimburse for it. So we have this thing called Seasonal Affective Disorder. I have a hunch that probably is a sort of a catch-all term. What it says to me is, for most of us, we learn on the basis of our childhood experiences, on the basis of our life experiences, and on the basis of social media, television shows, movies, everything. We learn to expect certain outcomes.
Yeah.
And from that, we kind of develop a belief that says, if anything doesn't go the way I expect it to, it's awful.
Yes.
You know, and we probably even add to that, it's awful, and it's got to be somebody's fault.
Yes.
And so that sort of sets us up for not really good vacations and Christmas and Thanksgiving. But I mean, think about Valentine's Day. I was driving up here today to do the show, and I think 80% of the ads on the radio were talking about what candy I should buy for Valentine's or what gift I should buy for Valentine's. And you know, my experience with Valentine's is if I buy the wrong candy, or I fail to buy candy, or I don't buy the right card, bad things happen to good people, namely me. And the person to whom I give the card is disappointed
Yeah.
because it doesn't meet his or her expectation. And I'm disappointed because he or she's not reacting the way I want them to. And then I get sad. So my sense is that it's kind of the disconnect between our memory of what was, which before the show, the three of us were talking about the fact that how accurate is my memory of what was anyway. If you talk to, the other thing I was thinking about is, I was born in the summer. And growing up in the summer means that your birthday is in the summer. And you know what that means?
No.
Nobody comes to your birthday party.
You're right.
If you're
School's
born
out.
during the school year, your mother brings cupcakes and everybody goes, yay, and sings happy birthday to you. In the summer, yeah. So that's my memory.
Yeah.
Now, probably the reality is that my parents had birthday parties and invited my school friends and my non-school friends, and they probably came. So my memory's probably not accurate, but my memory is, it was awful having a summer birthday.
Yes.
So that's just an example of how what I think happened may not really be what happened. But what I think happened has become my truth. And my truth then defines my expectations. So Valentine's, birthdays, the year is littered with expectations that are created for us by our families, created for us by ad campaigns to make money, and almost never do they live up to the expectation. So that's kind of the bad news. The other piece of the bad news is that people who are kind of around all the darn time, they don't live up to my expectations either. You know, when I was in training, one of my wise teachers said the definition of resistance, big psychological word, the definition of resistance is any time your client doesn't do what you want them to. I thought about that. I think that's kind of the way that people—
All human relations are.
And it's kind of the way we look at life, you know, is I want you to be a certain way. I want this show to go a certain way. I want me to appear a certain way. And if I have the fortune or misfortune of watching the show, I'll probably look at it and go, that's not what I wanted to do with my hands. That's not what I wanted to say. And to a greater or lesser extent, I will have to figure out what to do with that disappointment because I am a person. The other side of persons is the persons that we interact with. They're sort of our family. Have you ever noticed that family don't ever act exactly the way we expect them to, but they always act the way they're going to act?
Right. Can't change them.
Well, not very successfully, but we can wish that they would be different. So that's another thing that happens all throughout the year, is that I come home from work after a long day at work, and I have not had much decompression time in the car. So I get to my house and I come in the door, and because I'm tired and cranky and I've used up whatever extroversion I had during the day, so my introversion wants me to be by myself, and I kick the dog and I ignore the children and I grouse at my wife. And now all of those people are disappointed in me and I am disappointed in myself. I wonder what I could have done differently. So with the clients that I see, I would say to you that a significant percentage of them, what brings them to see me in the first place, can be boiled down to a sense of profound disappointment in the disconnect between what they thought was going to happen and what actually happened, and how their life unfolded and how they wished it to unfold.
I think that was,
You know?
yeah, I think that's very useful distinction, and it sort of syncs with my experience and so on. Peter, our audience probably has less familiarity with what a coach consultant does and how a coach consultant might differentiate himself or herself from, let's say, a clinical psychologist or our psychiatrist. Could you tell us some more of that? I mean, what do you actually do for people?
Maybe the way to frame it is to explain why I got into coaching.
Okay.
The whole purpose for me was that I wanted to be a better manager and a better leader. And I'd heard about this coaching piece, and being a jock and a competitive athlete and having great experiences with past coaches in sports, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to take this element and add it to my professional side, my corporate side?
Yeah.
So I went through a one-year training certification program to be a coach in order to be a better manager. During the process, I became a better husband, a better parent, overall better human being. Because coaching is a very specific and bracketed responsibility. When you look at the medical community, when you look at the doctor, the medical doctor, and the PhD, that is a broader capacity, a broader capability. Coaching is very specific from my perspective. It's all about helping people move forward. It's all about establishing goals, having visions, defining vision and a purpose. And the coach helps an individual define a future, helps them understand what their present condition is, which then defines the gap, the difference, the things that are still needing some work on them. And then develops a follow-up program of activities to help the person go from the present state condition to the desired state. Now, therapy, I clearly know when that area comes into play. And it's when my clients are stuck in the past. So for example, I was working with a client recently that was going through a transition, looking to get a new job, had a very successful career at a particular financial institution, and got let go. A lot of baggage associated with that experience, a lot of anger, frustration. So I was hired to help this individual define the path they need to take to get new employment. What happened throughout our coaching sessions is that we kept getting back to the bad experience they had. And even though I tried real hard to release that, I couldn't do it. I wasn't qualified to do that. And that's where I turn over to a therapist to say, here's something that's deeper, here's something that has some roots that I'm not aware of, certainly the individual's not aware of, that I need the professional help of a therapist to release the person from that piece so that then I can maximize my time with them, to experience with them, to move them forward a little bit more quickly, a little bit more clearly. So when I think about differentiating therapy and coaching, I think of coaching as moving someone from the present towards the future. And when I think of therapy, it's about the past, about the why, about the place where they're stuck, that they need, absolutely need professional help to get them to the present and move them into the future. So coaching, from my perspective, is present-oriented, moving to the future, whereas therapy is the past to the present and can be moving into the future. It depends upon the charge that the therapist has for that particular individual.
That's really useful, Peter. I think I now have a good understanding of what a coach consultant does. John, if you thought you were going to escape, you know, this thing, you knew that this was coming. I can see going to Dick, a psychologist, you know, counseling psychologist. I can see asking Peter to help me along. But, you know, when it comes to psychiatrists, I sort of carry the burden of our whole society that you only go to psychiatrist if you're really in trouble and something's really wrong with you and you are operating outside the boundaries of normal people. But the truth of the matter is, you know, there's a big difference between feeling the blues and something like clinical depression. And I was wondering how you can help people understand when they should come see you instead of Peter, instead of Dick.
Excellent question. For me, psychiatry can handle all spectrum of mental health disorders, from the life transition, the loss, and to the more severe mental health conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, clinical severe depression, Psychiatrists, we are medically trained, so most of us went through med school or what's called DO school. There's two paths, but most go to medical school. So we have experience through, in all areas of medicine or most areas of medicine. And so we deal more with, and part of anyway, the medical end of the person in addition to the psychological or the life situation, and we try to incorporate what's called a biopsychosocial model, the biologic components, the psychological components, why someone came to be from the past, and then the social, where are they now, how were they raised, what expectations did they learn as a child. So we try to incorporate all that into the picture and then come up with a plan to best help that person. And so if someone needs a medication for a psychiatric reason, that's obviously a reason for a psychiatrist for most of the time. It can be separated to some degree a matter of spectrum from low degrees of suffering but needing some help getting unstuck to high degrees of suffering where they're stuck. And I like to use the analogy, sometimes people fall into a hole, they can climb out themselves. Sometimes the hole is too deep and they need help. They need someone to reach out, reach down and help them up, and that's kind of like therapy. Sometimes the hole's so deep you need a ladder, and that can be the medicine.
Quick question to ask, really quick. How do you feel about family physicians, internists prescribing medication as opposed to using the route of a psychiatrist?
I don't think we have enough time completely for that.
But just really brief.
The truth is, there are too many people that need the help from the medications for psychiatry. There's not enough psychiatrists to be able to address all of it. And so the family practitioner, the primary care physician, is trained in the general, mental health conditions, the kind of the bread and butter depression and anxiety, and they are knowledgeable of the medications, the basic medications for that. And so out of practicality, though, we kind of have to depend on that because there's just not enough of us to do it. But when, if something gets too severe or they've tried and failed maybe one or two different medications, then
it's time to
move on.
I agree with you about that, but that was very useful. I have a big question for all of you, and we can chat about it for about 8 minutes or so. My big issue right now is making a major transition in life, from being active, really active, and maybe in a couple of years, retiring. And that seems like a major challenge. And also, not only kind of transitions that are expected, but transitions that aren't expected. And before we got here, we were talking about the fact that both you and I had the experience of the sudden death of a spouse at a relatively young age, basically changing our life trajectory and all of those kinds of things. And as I face these transitions, and, let's say the expected one, I feel a lot of anxiety and stress, like how I'm going to fill the days, what am I going to do, am I going to drive my husband crazy, is he going to drive me crazy?
Probably.
Yeah. I figured there was bad news, So I want to ask all three of you, what can you do with a normal bread and butter kind of situation? I mean, I could see myself really getting freaked out, over it, that it moved from just kind of finding my way and all of that to basically being so anxious and stressed out that I might, do something bad, like start medicating myself. You know what I mean? And that's how many people get into trouble. Yeah. So.
Well, there's a sort of a normal ebb and flow of life. And we all follow that normal ebb and flow of life. And it used to be that the model that we grew up with was overly simplified. You grow up, you go to school, you graduate from school, you get a job, you get married, you have children, you work, you stay married, you work some more, your children grow up, your children leave the house and stay gone, and then you retire and you have the golden years of your retirement. and that was the model.
The expectation.
And the expectation. And of course, that is not the reality that we live in today. The reality we live in today is that the average young person, age 20 or so, can be expected to have 7 distinct careers in their working lifetime. 7 careers? We were supposed to have 1 and get a gold watch. And so normalizing that for a person graduating from college who's struggling to find a job, normalizing it for their parents who are having a boomerang child move back in the house.
Absolutely.
To say, worse things could happen. Your child, as opposed to moving back into your house, could be out self-medicating or selling drugs or stealing cars. Well, okay. So I think normalizing the fact that there is a developmental flow which is different from what we were told it was going to be. And that probably, as Gail Sheehy writes in her wonderful anthropological works, about every 20 years, we need to redefine our goals. Because about every 20 years, the goals that we set, we either have achieved them or we're never going to achieve them. And so we probably would sit down and say, okay, as opposed to, ooh, I failed at this, what are the new opportunities?
Right.
If you're looking at retirement as an end, I remember when my mother was anticipating my father retiring, she was terrified that the man was going to be home for lunch every day.
I have that
And he
terror,
was. He was.
Yeah.
And she kept saying, find something to do with your time.
Yeah, I thought I've got to think of a way to find something for me to do at lunch so that we don't have to have breakfast, lunch, dinner. You know? Well,
so we know that the 60s now is the 50s. And the 70s is 60s. So I think the transitions, if you view them as life transitions as opposed to life crises,
better.
that is a start. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Peter, you're a big, I just want to make sure that our audience knows that we're talking about Gail Sheehy, who wrote a very famous book called Passages, which is about transitions in life. And I heard Peter, before we got here, talking about her too.
I still have the paper that I wrote around that book about the transitions that happen, are predictable and happen on a regular basis. So I'm all in and all on board about the transitions. To your question, what I love about your question, that's the kind of juicy coaching question that we just love, because it's all about determining and developing a vision for the future. How do we do that? Because we all have concerns and fears and maybe some bad experiences, but when we start goal setting and planning and thinking about what pieces to put in place to create a vision of the future that we want to be proactive rather than reactive, man, I think you and I need to have some breakfast.
Yeah, I think so too. John, how would you help, someone like me if I did get really stressed out, really anxious, not be able to take it, and found myself going the way of addiction? Addiction in this case to prescription.
I was going to say, I mean, what we're talking about is transitions, and those are most of them are expected transitions. But then, what happens when things don't go as planned? And no one, as a child, goes, "Gosh, I wish I were an addict."
Right.
No, no one says that, and so no one's planning for that, or no one plans for, I'm going to be so depressed I can't get out of bed today.
Yes.
And so those are, and again, first off, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yes.
Everybody needs help. We're not islands unto ourselves. Don't be afraid to reach out to family, loved ones, or
One
a
of
professional.
Professionals.
And from my perspective, again, I would look and talk with you, evaluate, and see, would a medicine be helpful? Is it necessary in this situation? And to me, I say when someone is so stuck that the symptoms, either the anxiety or the depression, prevents them from doing what they need to do to continue to do healthy things for themselves, that can be a trigger or a flag that a medication may be helpful.
Yeah.
But with addiction, again, the core mainstay is group therapy, group support, AA or NA. There are certain medicines for certain addictions, so it is truly a kind of a group effort.
Yes.
For all that.
You three were talking about collaboration and referrals between, coach consultants, psychologists, psychiatrists. We have just a very, very brief time. If you each could give a sentence or two. I know. Look, I'm forced to write abstracts of papers, and, I hate writing the abstract. But what would you like the audience to hear in particular about what you said, or what you still would like to say? So you get one or two sentences. So I'm going to start out with, I'm going to mix it up. I'm just going to start with Peter. You get one or two.
Straight A's. Anticipate a positive outcome. Acknowledge whatever happens. Accept it. Appreciate it. Take action. And then follow it with an accountability or a support system.
Well, that's a good AAAA plan, John?
First off, be realistic. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses. Not everyone has strengths in every area.
Yes.
Be flexible. If something doesn't happen the way you anticipate or expect, learn to reframe it, but in a way that can be helpful. And again, if you're truly suffering, or if a loved one's truly suffering, don't be afraid to ask for help.
I think we need to learn to ask for help.
Yeah.
And Dick, you get to be the last person.
2 quickies. Okay, here's my
very
2 quickies. First one is, we may not have control over the things that happen to us. We do have our control over our reaction to the things that happen to us. That's my first thought. My second thought is there are 4 things we have absolute control over.
I'd like to know them.
And they're the same things that I recommend to all of the clients I work with. The first is you can control what you eat. The second is you control sleep. The third is you can control exercise in your life. And the fourth is you can control play. So eat, sleep, exercise, and play.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great advice. All of you have given me some great advice. There is possibility of being glad and not, being sad. I think the control piece is very hard. Really,
Letting go of it.
Yeah. Oh, well, letting go of control is the most difficult thing, or trying to mold people in our expectations or all of those bad kinds of things. I really want to thank the 3 of you for coming here today. And I wish we could continue this conversation for another hour or maybe 2, but I know you're all busy. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
You did
very
a
much.
great service.